Welcome to our presentation on accessible customer service, brought to you by Surge Learning. Welcome to our presentation on accessible customer service, brought to you by Surge Learning. This presentation is general in nature and suitable for all audiences. Specific provincial information is available throughout the module. This presentation is supported by your employer's policies and procedures and your province's Human Rights Act and accessibility legislation. The experience that your customer receives should be positive, regardless of his or her disability. Is it always that way? Here is a scenario where a young woman named Marianne tried to obtain service from a dental office in a building with which she was unfamiliar. Marianne uses a wheelchair, and while entering the building, she required the assistance of a passerby in order to get herself up and over a door threshold that was too high. Then, the sign said that the toilet was accessible, but there was no way she could open the washroom door to get in. Finally, getting up to the reception counter, Marianne found it too high. Eventually, she was noticed by the receptionist, who leaned out and talked over the counter instead of coming around to speak with her face to face. The receptionist also shouted and spoke in childlike tones to Marianne. What should have been a pleasant visit to a new dentist turned out to be a frustrating and demoralizing experience. Today you will learn about accessibility legislation and the standard on accessible customer service. You will also have a better understanding about disability and the barriers to goods and services that limit accessibility. You will explore resources with which you can provide goods and services to individuals with a variety of disabilities so that Marianne and others like her will not experience this again. The Canadian Human Rights Code and the government's commitment to ensure equal participation, along with similar legislation in the provinces, focuses on equal rights on the basis of sex, race, nationality, and disability. This legislation paved the way for improved employment standards and disability rights. In recent years, the provinces have developed legislation and standards to be implemented over the next 10 years. The Customer Service Standard is one of several standards which include accessibility to information and communication, housing, transportation, employment, and the built environment. In some provinces, the standards also include internet accessibility and income support, along with inclusive communities and emergency preparedness. The Customer Service Standard is the standard that we will review in more detail. The goal of this standard is to remove barriers to participation for all types of disabilities. The accessibility legislation is founded on the Human Rights Code of Canada and the Human Rights Code or Act in each province. Click on your province for more information about its human rights legislation. The Ontario Human Rights Commission states that the Code protects people from discrimination and harassment because of past, present, and perceived disabilities. Disability covers a broad range and degree of conditions, some visible and some not visible. A disability may have been present from birth, caused by an accident, or developed over time. There are physical, mental, and learning disabilities, mental disorders, hearing or vision disabilities, epilepsy, mental health disabilities and addictions, environmental sensitivities, and other conditions. Choose one right answer. The human rights legislation in your province is correct. Disability. Correct. Correct. Click on your province for more information about its human rights legislation. The Prince Edward Island Human Rights Commission states that all persons are equal in dignity and human rights without regard to age, color, creed, disability, ethnic or national origin, family status, gender expression, gender identity, marital status, political belief, race, religion, sex, sexual orientation, or source of income. Preamble Human Rights Act. Click on your province for more information about its human rights legislation. The Nova Scotia Human Rights Act states that persons will not discriminate against an individual due to age, race, color, religion, creed, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, physical or mental disability, an irrational fear of contracting an illness or disease, ethnic, national or aboriginal origin, family status, marital status, source of income, political belief, affiliation, or activity. Click on your province for more information about its human rights legislation. The Manitoba Human Rights Code provides protection from unreasonable discrimination in areas such as employment, housing, and services available for the public. Reasonable accommodation is provided for individuals with physical or mental disability or related characteristics or circumstances, including reliance on a service animal, a wheelchair, or any other remedial appliance or device. Click on your province for more information about its human rights legislation. Accommodating people with disabilities legislation falls under the Alberta Human Rights Act, AHR Act. The AHR Act recognizes that all people are equal in dignity, rights and responsibilities, regardless of race, religious beliefs, color, gender, physical disability, mental disability, age, ancestry, place of origin, marital status, source of income, family status, or sexual orientation. Click on your province for more information about its human rights legislation. The British Columbia Human Rights Code says you cannot be discriminated against because you have a disability. The British Columbia Human Rights Commission has interpreted the concept of disability very broadly. For example, many health conditions, such as heart disease, learning disabilities, asthma, HIV/AIDS, and depression, have been considered to be a disability. Correct. Disability. How would you define disability? When we think of persons with disabilities, most of us automatically think of individuals in wheelchairs or those who are visually impaired. From the two choices below, select the one that lists invisible disabilities. Correct. Here is an example of an invisible learning disability. Portia has severe dyslexia. This means that reading is difficult for her. She is in a new office building and is trying to read the directory on the wall in order to locate the restroom. The wording could be supported with an image to make it easier for Portia and others with reading or language challenges. In order to provide an accessible and pleasant customer experience for her, select the best image from the two on the right. Correct. Reflection. Let's reflect for a moment. Do you recall the earlier question, how do you define disability? Have you reconsidered your response after reviewing Portia's situation? Some definitions of disability are quite extensive. Let's review them for your province. Click on your province for disability definitions. In British Columbia's legislation, disability is not defined. Rather, it has evolved to include protection for people who have or are perceived to have mental or physical disabilities, whether visible or non-visible, permanent or temporary. Specific disabilities are not named in the statute, allowing for a broad interpretation. All major diseases and illnesses are included, for example, cancer, Alzheimer's, Crohn's disease, cerebral palsy, epilepsy, seizures, heart attack, heart conditions, HIV/AIDS, arthritis, etc. All mental illnesses are included, including developmental delays and learning disabilities. Drug and/or alcohol dependencies are included, along with morbid obesity. Common conditions, such as colds and the flu, are not considered disabilities. Click on your province for the Alberta Human Rights Act, AHR Act, says that physical disability means any degree of physical disability, infirmity, malformation, or disfigurement that is caused by bodily injury, birth defect, or illness. Some disabilities that have been established as protected under human rights law are epilepsy or seizures, heart attack or heart condition, cancer, severe seasonal allergies, shoulder or back injury, asthma, Crohn's disease, hypertension, hysterectomy, spinal malformation, visual acuity, color blindness, loss of body parts such as fingers, speech impediments, arthritis, muscular atrophy, cerebral palsy, alcoholism, and drug dependence. Common conditions such as colds and flus that do not last long and have no long-term effects are not normally considered to be physical disabilities. Mental disabilities are defined by the AHR Act as any mental disorder, developmental disorder, or learning disorder, regardless of the cause or duration of the disorder. Some examples of mental disabilities include dyslexia, depression, schizophrenia, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and panic attacks. It is not possible to provide a complete list of conditions normally considered to be disabling under human rights law. The disabilities listed above are examples only. Click on your province for disability definitions. In Manitoba, disability is not expressed specifically. Rather, it is open to a broad range of possibilities with a focus on individual needs and experiences. Those individuals experiencing hardship are encouraged to express their needs and be willing to provide reasonable proof from a doctor, therapist, or other individual who can verify a disability. The individual is encouraged to suggest accommodations that would work for them and to follow through with the accommodations agreed upon. Click on your province for disability definitions. The definition in Nova Scotia is broadly based, with an emphasis on barriers and participation. Disability includes those who have long-term physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairments that, in interaction with various barriers, may hinder their full and effective participation in society on an equal basis with others. Click on your province for disability definitions. Under the PEI Human Rights Act, disability is a previous or existing condition which may be from injury, illness, or birth defect. For example, blindness, amputated limbs, back injuries, epilepsy, cancer, developmental delays or learning disabilities, emotional and mental illness, such as depression. Alcohol and drug addiction are also disabilities. Recurrent pain may be considered a disability, whereas common temporary disabilities such as colds and flu are not. Click on your province for disability definitions. The Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act 2005 states that disability means A. Any degree of physical disability, infirmity, malformation or disfigurement that is caused by bodily injury, birth defect, or illness, and includes diabetes, mellitus, epilepsy, a brain injury, any degree of paralysis, amputation, lack of physical coordination, blindness or visual impediment, deafness or hearing impediment, muteness or speech impediment, or physical reliance on a guide dog or other animal, or on a wheelchair or other remedial appliance or device. B. A condition of mental impairment or a developmental disability. C. a learning disability, or a dysfunction in one or more of the processes involved in understanding or using symbols or spoken language. D. A mental disorder. Or E. An injury or disability for which benefits were claimed or received under the insurance plan established under the Workplace Safety and Insurance Act, 1997. Handicap. The definition of disability in some provinces is quite specific, while in other provinces it is more broadly based. The intent or goal is the same. Think about why we have a human rights code and a focus on no discrimination due to a disability. Choose one best answer. Correct. The provinces have set goals to make their communities more accessible on a number of levels. Implementation will be in phases over several years. Each phase will address a specific standard or area of focus, for example, customer service, accessible housing, or public transportation, among others. Click on your province for information about accessibility legislation. British Columbia's Accessibility 2024 legislation is focused on making BC the most progressive province in Canada for people with disabilities by 2024. The Government of British Columbia has made a base commitment to a progressive realization of increased accessibility and reduction of barriers by supporting Canada's ratification of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, UNCRPD. To accomplish this, BC will focus on 12 building blocks: inclusive government, service delivery, internet, built environment, housing, transportation, income support, employment, financial security, inclusive communities, emergency preparedness, and the consumer experience. Click on your province for information about accessibility legislation. Accommodating people with disabilities legislation falls under the Alberta Human Rights Act, AHR Act. Accommodation means making changes to certain rules, standards, policies, workplace cultures, and physical environments to ensure that they don't have a negative effect on a person because of the person's mental or physical disability, religion, gender, or any other protected ground. The goal of accommodation is to enable equitable participation in many of the areas protected by the AHR Act, such as employment practices, employment applications and advertisements, residential or commercial tenancy, goods, services, accommodation, or facilities customarily available to the public, for example, restaurants, stores, hotels, or provincial government services. Communications such as statements, publications, notices, signs, symbols, emblems, or other representations that are published, issued, or displayed before the public. And membership in trade unions, employers' organizations, or occupational associations. Wow, that is a very inclusive list. You might be thinking, how could I possibly know about all of this and meet the needs of disabled persons? You're right, it is a lot. Think of how much you have learned already: human rights, disability, and accessibility. Now we are going to consider how barriers affect access to goods and services, and how having some resources will help us improve accessibility. Click on your province for information about the Accessibility for Manitobans Act, AMA, became law December 5, 2013. Under this landmark legislation, the Manitoba government will develop mandatory accessibility standards. Each standard will address barriers for Manitobans in key areas of daily living. Standards will apply to Manitoba's private and public sector organizations and will include customer service, information and communication, built environment, employment, and transportation. Click on your province for information about accessibility In Nova Scotia, the Minister's Advisory Panel on Accessibility Legislation determined that the accessibility legislation should address access issues related to the following: information and communication, employment, the design of public buildings and public spaces, the built environment, attitudes and public education, awareness, transportation, client services, housing. Click on your province for information about accessibility. In Prince Edward Island, the PEI Council of People with Disabilities promotes the full participation and inclusion of people with disabilities in island society by promoting self-help, providing a voice on issues, monitoring to ensure improvements, promoting strategies and policies that are determined by persons with disabilities, encouraging and facilitating communication, and creating public awareness. Links to their services and programs can be found on their website, www.peicod.pe.ca. Click on your province for information about. In Prince Edward Island, click on your province for information about. In Nova Scotia, click on your province for information about. The Accessibility for All Ontarians with Disabilities Act, or AODA, has a goal of making Ontario accessible by 2025. Under this Act are 5 standards, including 1. Customer service, which is required by 2016 and is included in this presentation. 2. Information and communication. 3. Employment. 4. Transportation. 5. Design of public spaces. Wow, that is a very inclusive list. You might be thinking, how could I possibly know about all of this and meet the needs of disabled persons? You're right, it is a lot. Think of how much you have learned already: human rights, disability, and accessibility. Now we are going to consider how barriers affect access to goods and services, and how having some resources will help us improve accessibility. The provinces have slightly different legislation, yet similar goals. From these 2 options, select the correct answer. Correct. Barriers and resources. Barriers are anything that impedes access or causes hardship in using goods and services. If we consider stairs as an example, look how many of your customers may find stairs to be a barrier. Anyone with a mobility aid, such as a wheelchair, walker, or cane. Anyone who may be short of breath or easily fatigued due to age or illness. Anyone who may be at risk for falls, such as those who have had a stroke or have neuromuscular diseases such as multiple sclerosis or Parkinson's disease, as well as children and those in strollers. Barriers are anything that prevents a person from fully participating in the activity they wish. There are many types of barriers that can make goods and services inaccessible. From these two options, select the answer with the things that could be considered barriers. Correct. All of those things were barriers. We can see that barriers fall into 4 subgroups: architectural, physical, communication, including technology, and attitude. If we start with an assumption that everyone has a disability, we can make our workplace more accessible by addressing these 4 types of barriers. Barriers. Architectural. Susan has a learning disability and is easily confused in large and noisy environments. She is trying to find her way to a specialist's office in a huge teaching hospital. Surprisingly, she finds it easily. Look at these 2 options and select the answer that includes building design items that made this building more customer-friendly. Incorrect. Barriers. Physical. Now let's consider an example of physical barriers. Pierre is installing a new reception desk and wants to be sure to get the right one. Imagine yourself with a disability and think about what would make things easier. Here are some examples. If I were blind and had a service animal. If I were hearing disabled and wanted to see the speaker's face in good lighting. If I felt anxious in new places. If I was of shorter stature. If I was short of breath and easily fatigued. If I needed a quiet place and more time. Generally, a reception desk that has both a place to stand and a place to sit would meet most needs. It should be well lit and close to the entrance. The area should be quiet and not distracting. Barriers. Communication. Great communication is essential in any relationship. Typically, we communicate with customers in 3 ways. In person, this includes face-to-face or on the phone. In print, and on our websites. When communicating with your customer, remember that customer service for those who are disabled have elements that are common with all customer service, which is being helpful and courteous. Ask the person what they need and how you can help. If you do not know how to help, follow through with someone else and find out. We'll discuss this more when we talk about knowing your resources. Always acknowledge and greet the person, looking up and speaking directly to them. This is especially important if they are accompanied by a support person or interpreter. Also, encourage the involvement of the support person and ask, "How can I support you in your role?" And remember your manners. Your private behavior is not welcome in a public space. Personal conversations, eating your lunch, and using your personal cell are not appropriate at reception. Communication in print. Most organizations do a good job of having their print material available in various languages. Other suggestions include using large font and color contrast, along with simple and clear information. Sometimes less is more. Communication on website. Increasingly, customers rely on your website for information. Some easy tips for web design include being able to adjust the font size, use the audio version, translate to another language, and be able to navigate the site by using the keyboard only or another assistive device. Barriers. Attitude. Attitude is likely the most important factor in all customer service. Pretend for a moment that you are disabled. From the two choices below, check the one where employees have poor attitudes. Correct. Sadly, all of these attitudes are encountered by disabled customers. Why do you think this happens? Perhaps because people do not understand, or they have had limited experience, or their own values have shaped their perception of others. They may also be frustrated because they want to assist, but the organization has few resources with which to help, or they just don't know how. However, inclusive societies have a moral requirement to be informed and provide equal customer service to all individuals. We achieve that by improving our ability to assist, being motivated to do so, and monitoring our attitude by establishing helping relationships. Take a moment to reflect on your own feelings and attitudes. Is there an opportunity to learn more and provide better customer service? Reviewing this list might help. Customer service is a helping relationship. In a helping relationship, I will be empathetic, be more patient, learn more about customer service in general, learn about working with disabled persons and specific situations such as working with someone with a mental illness, be respectful, be clear in my communication, be adaptable, and see it through. Individuals may find accessing your goods and services difficult due to language barriers. A number of resources are available for you, including AT&T's translation services, translation options on your web browser, and language translation apps for smartphones. And remember your smile. Sometimes you may have difficulty assisting your consumer. Remember that disabled persons don't mind if you ask them how you can help. Let them be your teacher. Get assistance from your coworkers. A team is better than an individual in solving problems. Let the consumer know that you may need some time to access resources at your employers, online, or in the Surge library. Be sure they are comfortable in the meantime. Offer them water, a place to wait, and show them the restrooms. You may also need to find another way for them to access the service. Sometimes it is very challenging for disabled consumers to access your services, and you may need to be creative in coming up with a solution. Here is an example. Richard is blind and uses a white cane. Your establishment has many stairs and narrow hallways and closed doors. Richard is uncomfortable. How could you assist him? From the two choices, check the correct answer. Correct. In summary, You have learned about human rights in Canada as the starting point for accessibility legislation in the provinces. The legislation outlines goals or standards, the first of which is related to customer service. You have learned about disability, barriers to goods and services, and resources to support the inclusion of disabled persons. These resources include web links and documents in the Surge Library. For some provinces, you have learned about the training requirements related to the customer service standard. Accessibility legislation will take several years to fully implement. We will all continue to learn more about each standard. Thank you for joining us today for our module on accessible customer service.